Hey guys, it's Bella. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are all having the best week so far. If you're new here, welcome. On Mondays, we talk about true crime cases on this channel, so if that's something you're interested in, come join. Make sure to subscribe. I know it's a Friday today, not a Monday, but that's because I'm making up for missing last week, which if you watched my last video, you would know all about that. We also just moved places, and this new place gets a lot more sunlight than my old filming room. I think my old filming room must have been like really dungeony or something because my eyes are really struggling with the amount of sunlight that I get here. Like right behind where you guys are is this big like corner of windows and I get so much sunlight and my eyes are just really struggling to adjust. So I'm sorry if I'm sitting here like I've got really bad hay fever for the entire video. So in today's video, we are going to be covering a solved case. This case actually happened a couple of years ago in 2018 in Austin, Texas. And I had never heard of this before until super recently. And you guys are going to be shocked at this one. I know I was. The entire time I was researching it, I was just jaw dropped. I could not believe it. It is so incredibly heartbreaking. Before we do get into it, I just quickly want to thank today's sponsor NordVPN for making this video possible. I'm sure you guys know by now that I have been using NordVPN for years and I genuinely do not know what I was doing before I started using it. I use my VPN every single day. Every time I'm on my phone or my laptop, my VPN is on. I use it for everything. We're actually going back to Australia tomorrow for a couple of weeks just to visit, which I'm very excited about. But you best believe that I will be using my VPN when using the airport Wi-Fi and the plane Wi-Fi. And when I get back to Australia, you best believe that I will be setting my VPN straight back to the UK so I can continue watching Love Island because we're leaving right at the very end of the season and I don't want to miss it. And in Australia, it just doesn't come out straight away and I don't want to be behind. And speaking of coming out, like things not coming out straight away, I use my VPN while we're here to watch Married at First Sight Australia because Married at First Sight Australia is the superior Married at First Sight. I can assure you guys it is so good. And they don't start airing it here in the UK until the season is over in Australia. And I'm just not waiting that long. So I have been using my VPN to watch that right here. I need to be up to date. And while I am, watching my silly little shows, NordVPN is doing work behind the scenes. It protects you from malware, trackers, ads. It protects you on public Wi-Fi. It's also the fastest VPN out there, so you guys have got to get on it. I promise you won't regret it. If you use my link at nordvpn.com/bellafiore, which I will also put in the description box for you to click it easier, you will get an extra 4 months with the purchase of any 2-year plan. And when you purchase a 2-year plan, you also get a bonus gift. So make sure you guys check that out. I will leave all of the information in the description box down below for you. And let's go ahead and get into today's case. So Theodore Shaughnessy, who was known by everyone in his life as Ted, was born on the 7th of February in 1963, and he was the youngest of 3 kids. So he had 2 older brothers named Tim and Tom, which I am obsessed with. Tim, Ted, and Tom. That might be the best thing I've ever heard. They grew up in Arizona, just outside of Phoenix, and from a young age, Ted was obsessed with basically going fast, like the speed of cars, and this is something that followed him into adulthood. He loved fast cars, go-karting, that sort of thing. His brother Tom described him as completely fearless. In the early 80s, Ted met a woman named Corey Garman at a video arcade in Phoenix, and they just had so much in common, and by the late 80s they were married. They then moved to Austin, Texas, where they started a high-end jewelry business together named Gallery Jewelers, and they really built this business up together. Jewelry was one of their many common interests that had brought them together in the first place. Corey worked more behind the scenes. She was the appraiser. She studied both fine art and gemology in school, so she appraised the gemstones and the diamonds. And then Ted was more the face of the store because he was just amazing with people. He was a really friendly guy who loved to meet and connect with people. One of his close friends, Tad Cole, said he had never heard anyone say anything bad about Ted that wasn't positive. He said, quote, "I hoped I would be like that. I hoped I would get the Ted dust because he was just very effusive and people would drawn to him, wanted to be around him. He was just a really great guy to have as a friend, just a hell of a lot of fun to be around." His wife Corey also said, quote, "I didn't know anyone who didn't like him. He was described as a very enthusiastic person, super engaging, friendly, very chatty. He could have a conversation with pretty much anyone and just really had a way of making people feel comfortable to a point where he actually made friends with customers while he was working at the store. One woman named Karen Tanner was one of these people. She went into the jewelry store one day as a customer dinner, Ted started up a conversation with her, and the rest is history. They became friends. She became friends with Corey as well. They were all, really close. He was just an easy guy to get along with and to like because he had a huge heart. He was just a really generous person, not only to those that he knew, but towards strangers as well. His sister-in-law said he was the type of guy who would buy groceries for the people who were behind him in the checkout line of the grocery store. His brother Tim said he had quietly loaned him money interest-free when he was going through a rough time, and he had never harassed him to pay him back within a certain time or anything like that. He just loved to help people, and it was never a showy thing. He would never go and tell a bunch of people. He did it very quietly because he just genuinely wanted to help people from the good of his heart. By the year 2000, the Shaughnessy's had built an amazing life together. They had a successful business. They had bought a beautiful house in a great area just down the road from the shop at 9000 Oliver Drive. They had 2 dogs, these big Rotties named Bart and Brina, who were like their children. They just adored these dogs. Ted would take them into work with him like little shop assistants, or I guess big shop assistants. They were big dogs. And Ted and Corey were just crazy about each other too. Everyone that knew them said they were the perfect couple. There was just one thing missing. They really wanted to be parents. And so in the spring of 2000, they flew to Ukraine to adopt a 16-month-old boy who they named Nicholas, and he went by Nick throughout his whole life. And for Ted and Corey, it was instant love. Nick was the absolute light of their lives, and they were amazing parents as well. So they were a very tight-knit, close family. There was a lot of love in their household. Everyone in their lives knew what a proud father Ted was. He and Nick were basically joined at the hip. If Ted was doing something, Nick would be there too. And over the years, he grew into a smart, good-looking young guy. He took after his dad in a lot of ways. He loved fast cars just like his dad. They would go go-karting together all the time. Ted loved to drive race cars, and he would take Nick to the track a lot. Nick also became very entrepreneurial, probably because of his parents and the fact that they had started such a successful business together. So their, business savviness kind of rubbed off on Nick. Like as early as middle school, he started selling candy bars from his high school locker. In high school, he started a car detailing business, which was pretty successful. Like at one point, he had 4 employees working for him. Also, while in high school in 2015, he met a girl named Jacqueline Edison. She had just moved from New Jersey to Texas that same year, and she and Nick got along instantly. They started dating, and they were pretty much inseparable from that point on. When they graduated from high school, they moved to an off-campus townhouse together in College Station, where Jackie would be studying engineering at Texas A&M University, while Nick worked from home as a day trader. And then every weekend, they would make the 2-hour drive to go and visit Ted and Corey in Austin. And then on the 2nd of March in 2018, the lives of this seemingly perfect family would be changed forever. It was 4:30 a.m. and Corey and Ted were asleep in bed with their 2 dogs when they were woken up by the dogs barking at something. And it wasn't super out of the ordinary. The dogs sometimes would bark at a deer or a possum in the backyard. It wasn't anything to be super concerned about. But Ted went out to go and investigate anyway while Corey went back to sleep. And as he went out to investigate, he also armed himself with a .45 caliber gun because, they live in Texas. Just as Corey laid her head back down on the pillow, she heard a gunshot in the kitchen, followed by a barrage of gunfire. And of course, immediately she bolts out of bed. She grabs her own .357 revolver, which she always kept above her bed. And as the intruder started approaching the bedroom, she saw her beloved dog Bart shot and killed in the doorway. She then opened fire into the doorway as well until she ran out of bullets, at which point she ran to go and hide in the bedroom closet, and she called 911, all while thinking that at any moment the intruder is going to come and find her in this closet door, and she's defenseless. She's out of bullets. They're just going to shoot and kill her.
Travis County 911.
There's a shooting. My husband got out of bed, my dogs were barking. There were shots fired.
Shots were fired for him?
I don't know. Help me.
The 911 call is absolutely heartbreaking, and at one point on the call, she tells the dispatcher that she can hear moaning sounds, and she didn't know if it was Ted or if maybe she had shot one of the intruders and it was them, but all she could think was that if it was Ted, he was out there dying alone and she wasn't there with him. She told the dispatcher this, and she said she was going to go out there so that she could be with Ted if it was Ted, and the dispatcher said, no, absolutely not. Do not leave this closet. It's it's not safe. Eventually, after 15 minutes, the dispatcher tells her that the police should be there outside her house. So she leaves the closet, she's walking to the front door through the kitchen, and as she walks through the kitchen, she sees her husband of 30 years dead on the floor in a pool of his own blood, surrounded by bullet casings.
Oh my God.
She continues on to the front door to let first responders in, and when she gets to the front door, she opens it. No one's there. Not the first responders, not the intruders, nobody, because the police actually went to the wrong house. They went to her neighbor's house. Eventually, when they make it to the correct house, they meet Corey at the front door, and she is, I mean, exactly how you would expect after such an incredibly traumatic event. She is completely distraught. Her entire body is shaking, and so they take her to the squad car and they put her in there while first responders go inside, and they pronounce Ted Shaughnessy dead at 5:14 a.m. after having been shot 4 times. When Corey called her son Nick, who was 19 at the time, to tell him that his father had just been murdered, he was in absolute disbelief.
Nick.
Yes, Mom?
Mom, Dad's dead.
Wait, what?
Nick, Dad is dead.
What?
Nicholas, just, I need you.
He and his girlfriend Jackie immediately made the 2-hour drive from College Station to Austin, Texas to his parents' house, and they got there at about 8 a.m. and they actually ended up moving into that house with Corey for the next 3 months to just be there for her and give her the support and the comfort that she so badly needed in that time. She and Ted had been married for 30 years, and without them moving in, she would have been in this big house alone for the first time in a very long time, without her husband, without one of her dogs, and in the same house that her husband was murdered in while she was there. When word spread throughout the community about the murder, nobody could believe that Ted was gone, and there was a huge outpouring of support for the Shaughnessy family. Ted's friend Tad Cole said, quote, "Ted was a force of life. Hard to believe that force of life was no longer." Tad's wife Vicky also said, quote, "There's not a negative bone in that man's body. He was a rare gift and he deserved to live to be an old man and to live life." Another quote said, "Ted Shaughnessy died doing exactly what everyone that knew him knew that he would do in a situation that threatened both his and his wife's lives. He saved the life of his wife Corey by giving her just a few critical seconds to fight back." So investigators got to work immediately, and they started obviously by searching through the house and through the crime scene. In the kitchen where Ted had been shot, they found that there were actually 2 different calibers of shell casings. So both a .40 caliber and a .380 caliber handgun had been used, which meant there was likely 2 shooters involved. There were no signs of forced entry, and as they made their way through the house, they found an open window in Nick's old bedroom, and the security screen of the window had also been removed from the outside, so this was believed to be the attacker's point of entry. There was also a fingerprint found on the window, so that was also sent off for testing. In that same room, there was a dresser in the room, and in the bottom drawer of that dresser was a box for a .40 caliber handgun, but the gun was missing from its box, and that was the only thing that was missing from the entire house. And of course, the gun that was used, one of the guns that was used in the shooting, was a .40 caliber handgun, so it very well could have been the Shaughnessy's own gun that was used in the murder. Of course, being owners of this high-end jewelry store, living in this big beautiful house, the first most likely theory that investigators thought about was the fact that this could be a robbery gone wrong. So they were interviewing some of their neighbors, and they interviewed the Shaughnessy's next door neighbor, a woman named Kim, and she said that everyone in the neighborhood pretty much knew that they owned a jewelry store. And she said, quote, "It's not cheap jewelry, just so you know, like I'm talking hundreds to millions of dollars of jewelry." Police also went and interviewed Nick, and he, Corey and Jackie also all handed over their phones to aid police in the investigation, because of course in a case like this you always have to look into and eliminate the family members, and the family also wanted to do everything that they could to aid police in their investigation and to help catch Ted's killer. So when Nick did his interview, the first thing they did, of course, was confirm that he had an alibi, which he did. His phone records proved that he was 2 hours away in College Station at the time that the murder took place. Also, when they looked through his phone, and Nick also told them this to try and help with the investigation, but the Shaughnessy's had a home security system, and he had access to this home security system on his phone through an app, which he helped his parents with because they weren't very good with technology. The security system hadn't actually been set. It wasn't on at the time of the murder because Ted and Corey pretty much only set it when they were both leaving the house. So if they're both at home, they're not bothering to turn on their home security system. But it did actually still provide some helpful information. So it showed that Nick's old bedroom window had been opened at 4:27 a.m. 17 minutes later at 4:44 a.m., the system alerted to glass breaking in the kitchen, and this is around the same time that Corey said the shooting occurred, so the glass breaking was likely a result of that. And this meant that the intruders had been inside the Shaughnessy house for 17 minutes before Ted confronted them. This is 17 minutes in which these intruders could have been looking around the house for something to steal because, of course, they were prominent high-end jewelry dealers. They would have had a lot of high-end jewelry in the house. They had a lot of money. They had a safe in the house, so there was a lot of stuff there for them to steal. They were prime targets for a break-in. And this was Corey's belief, that this was a robbery gone wrong, but investigators thought this was unlikely because, like I said, nothing from the house was taken. The only thing that was missing was that .40 caliber handgun. So investigators just thought something did not add up about this robbery gone wrong theory because there was no signs of forced entry. Nothing was taken. They knew that Corey was in the house, so they could have held her at gunpoint and tried to get her to open the safe or take them to some jewelry or some money or something like that, and they didn't. And so for this reason, investigators really believed that this was a targeted attack and that the intruders were known to the Shaughnessy family. And on top of that, the .40 caliber handgun that was missing, they believe was involved in the shooting, in the murder, and why would an attacker show up at the house without their own weapon, without their own gun? They likely knew that that .40 caliber handgun was in there. There was also at least 3 cars parked in the Shaughnessy's driveway, so it would have been clear to any intruder that there was somebody home. Their dogs also started barking, so not only were people home, but they would have known that there was like something going on because of the dogs. And there's no way intruders are going to want to break into somebody's home where they know that that person is home, especially in Texas, because people in Texas have guns. The Shaughnessy's alone had like 20 guns in the house. So for these reasons, investigators wanted to look into other possibilities that didn't include a robbery gone wrong. When they interviewed Nick, he actually gave them a couple of leads to follow. So he told them about an incident that had happened in the 90s when Ted was running a pawn shop. Basically, these armed robbers came into the store and they opened fire. Ted also had a gun and he shot back and injured one of the robbers, and then they were actually sent to prison for this attempted robbery. So Nick said maybe it's possible that they have gotten out of jail and they wanted to get revenge on Ted for sending them to jail. Investigators, of course, looked into this line of inquiry, but there was no evidence to show that these guys had been anywhere near the Shaughnessy house at the time of the murder, and so this lead turned out to be a dead end. The other piece of information, the other lead that Nick gave them during his interview was that he had actually done some sort of investigative work for the Shaughnessy's neighbor, Kim, who I mentioned earlier. She felt like her husband was cheating on her, and so she basically paid Nick to follow him. He, on a couple of occasions, like 2 or 3 times, went and followed this woman's husband to the hotels that he was taking women to, and he even put a tracker on this guy's car so that Kim would be able to see where he was and if he was lying about his location. You know, this guy could have wanted Nick's family dead or Nick dead in order to prevent him from telling his wife anything. He could have wanted his wife dead potentially and like hired somebody to go and kill her, and then they just went to the wrong house because the house that police had gone to instead of Corey and Ted's house was actually Kim's house. So if the police can mix that up and make that mistake, so could anybody else. The 3 cars that I mentioned that were parked out front of the Shaughnessy's house, one of them was actually a white Mercedes, and Kim also drove a white Mercedes. The house that they lived on, the neighborhood, wasn't lit either, so it was very dark. All of the houses looked very similar, so it wasn't that much of a reach. So detectives went to ask Kim about this, and she confirmed what Nick said, that she had paid him 2 or 3 times to follow her soon-to-be ex-husband, but she said that he never found out. She never told him that she had, you know, asked Nick to do this. And she also said she didn't fear for her life. her husband didn't have anything to gain from killing her, and she said, quote, "He's a liar for sure, but I don't think he's capable of that." So again, this was just another dead lead for investigators. So with nowhere else to turn, investigators actually turned their sights on Corey and started looking into her as a suspect. There were just a couple of things about her story, about the whole incident, about the way that she acted after the murder that made detectives look at her in a certain way, like she was a little bit sketchy. I mean, first of all, their first big question was, why did the attackers leave her alive? They knew she was there. She shot at them until she ran out of ammo. So why did they not try and find her and kill her, or at least get her to take them to some jewelry or the safe or anything? They also asked her about the .40 caliber handgun that was missing from its case in that dresser drawer. And she told them, you know, we have a lot of guns in different places for protection, so it's just at the jewelry store. And she took them to the jewelry store and the gun wasn't there. And she also couldn't find it anywhere in their house. And she said, you know, we have a lot of guns, so we have a lot of gun cases in different closets. I swear it isn't important, but the police just thought it was really weird. She was also the sole beneficiary of Ted's $1 million life insurance policy, and she tried to claim to get that life insurance policy pretty soon after Ted's death because, you know, without Ted, he was the face of the company. He was the face of their jewelry business, and so she was really struggling to stay afloat without him. And so that's why she tried to get the life insurance money. When she called the life insurance policy company to be like, hey, I'm just waiting on this to be paid out. Can you tell me what's going on? They basically told her, well, we can't give that to you because basically you're a suspect in your husband's murder. And that's actually how Corey found out she was even a suspect. So at this point, she's struggling to come to terms with the loss of her husband. She's going to have to close their business that they started together, that, you know, it's like Ted's legacy. And now she's also being scrutinized by law enforcement. They were sending unmarked police cars by the house all the time, which she said they were just super obvious. She could always tell when it was an unmarked police car driving by the house. One of the Shaughnessy's friends of Vicky said about Corey, quote, "She's got to be one of the strongest people I've ever met. It's not to say she wasn't feeling inside, but how she carries herself and gets through things, I can't imagine." Her friend Karen also said, quote, "Corey without Ted, I mean, she is an individual, but you know, they were such a unit. They were each other's friends." And then on top of everything she's already going through, she gets some more huge news from detectives. When they went and searched Nick and Jackie's house, they actually found a marriage certificate. So they had gotten married in secret 8 months earlier in the summer of 2017. And they hadn't told Corey or Ted. She was just finding out for the first time through detectives. And you know, she wasn't a massive fan of Jackie when Nick first brought her home for the first time in 2016. And now they've gotten married in secret, so young, so quickly, without telling anybody. It was kind of a lot to process, as you can imagine. But as soon as she found out about the marriage, she welcomed Jackie with open arms. She wanted her to feel like part of the family. And so she threw them a party. She also gifted Jackie a half-carat diamond pendant as kind of like a wedding gift. And planning this party and this celebration of her son and her new daughter-in-law was a welcome distraction from all of the pain that they had been suffering. And another welcome distraction is they were trying to keep the business open as well. Nick had agreed to work at Gallery Jewelry. Jackie also took the rest of the year off school so that she could help out. And they were really excited about this. They were excited to keep the business open. They were excited to keep Ted's legacy alive through the business. The family's business Facebook page made an announcement and said, quote, "We are happy to announce that Nicholas, Ted's son, will be carrying on his legacy here at Gallery." Meanwhile, police got the results back from the fingerprint that they found on the open window at the house, and it was a match to an employee from the company Renewal by Anderson, which is like a window and door company, and this employee assembled windows. So it was a bit of a bust. His fingerprint would have just been there from when he installed the window, and he didn't even live in Texas. He lived in Minnesota, but police weren't moving on from the window just yet. It was clearly the attacker's point of entry. And they remembered that when they interviewed Nick, he mentioned that he used to use that window to get in and out of his house, like sneakily. When he would get home drunk and stuff like that, he would sneak in through that window. And when detectives had asked him if anybody else knew about this window, he said that his friend Spencer did. Spencer was kind of Nick's only friend, I think. He didn't have a lot of friends, but he had like one best friend. And they were super close because while not even Nick's family knew about his marriage, Spencer did. He actually officiated the wedding for them. Nick had also told detectives a little bit about Spencer in his interview, and he said, quote, "He's not as fortunate as I to have parents that will help him like mine are, so he worked at his shitty Home Depot job, hating every second of it, and when he's not there, he's studying for his school at Texas." So to detectives, I'm sure you can imagine how this looks. It's this less fortunate guy, he doesn't really have a lot of money, he hates his job, and he knows that the Shaughnessy's have a lot of money. He knows that they have a safe at their house, he knows where the safe is. He knows how to sneak in and out of their house. He knows about this window that was clearly the point of entry for the attackers. Detectives were also still looking for the .40 caliber and the .380 caliber handguns that had been used in the shooting. And Nick, in his interview, had actually mentioned to detectives that he had given a .380 caliber handgun to Spencer. Naturally, police went and spoke to Spencer, and for the most part, he was really forthcoming with detectives. He agreed that he knew about the window because he and Nick would have drinks at the Shaughnessy house. There was like this barn on the property in the backyard where they would drink, and then when they would go to the barn, they would get in and out of the house through Nick's bedroom window. Detectives also searched his house and his car, and in his car they found the .380 caliber handgun that had been gifted to him by Nick, but when they ran ballistics on this gun, they found that it was not used in the murder. So it was just a coincidence that he had been gifted a .380 caliber handgun by Nick. His phone records also showed that he was nowhere near the Shaughnessy house at the time of the murder. He was at home. So while detectives did believe he was hiding something, he clearly wasn't involved in the murder, and so he was cleared as a suspect. However, this whole line of questioning with Spencer actually led them towards a new suspect, Nick Shaughnessy. They couldn't help but notice that he was the one who gave them Spencer's name. He told them Spencer didn't have a lot of money, hated his job, knew how to get in the house, had the gun, which in and of itself isn't alarming sketchy. You know, of course he wants to help find his dad's killer, but that, alongside all of his other actions since his dad's murder, made him very suspicious. Detectives, of course, have been keeping an eye on the whole Shaughnessy family, you know, Corey, Nick, and Jackie, since the murder took place, and Nick's bizarre behavior was really starting to add up. From the moment that he arrived at the Shaughnessy house on the morning of the murder, he was way too eager to help. He was like almost giddy. It wasn't in a way of, I want to help you in whatever way I can so you can find this guy. It was more like he was excited about it, and he wanted to steer detectives in a million different ways. He was the one that told them about Spencer. He was the one that told them about the armed robbery incident in the 90s. He told them about the neighbor. He was the one that told detectives his parents had a security system and that he could access it all from an app on his phone. He could enable it, disable it, whatever he wanted, all from his phone remotely. He also had his own security system at home at his townhouse in College Station with Jackie. And like right at the beginning of his interview, when police brought him in for questioning, he was like, oh, you know, if you want to prove that I wasn't involved, well, here's video footage of me and Jackie at home at the time of the murder. On the morning that he arrived at the Shaughnessy house as well, like the morning of the murder, he was almost overly inquisitive. He was going around like asking everybody questions, interviewing all the neighbors himself, like trying to find out and pry every little bit of information. He asked one of the first responders on the scene if his dad had suffered, which, you know, is not that strange, okay? His dad has just been murdered. I don't think it's weird for him to want to know if his dad suffered. I don't think it's weird for him to want to know as much information as possible. Detectives and first responders did say the way in which he was inquiring and the way in which he was asking these things was not normal. But individually, I don't think they're that strange. It's just when you add all of these things up alongside some of his other bizarre behaviors, it's strange. Like, for example, on that morning after his dad had been murdered, detectives were going around, they were testing the family for gunshot residue, getting their fingerprints, DNA, that sort of thing. And at one point, they're doing this with Nick, they're testing him, and he is facing away from the detectives, and they ask him to turn around so they can get his fingerprints. And he like jumps around in this like excited way, almost like an excited schoolboy. He was joking and laughing, and it was just kind of an odd way for him to be acting after his family has just gone through this unimaginable tragedy. And then on top of that, one of the first things he did when he got to the scene is he went straight to that window from his old bedroom, the one that the attackers used to get into the house, and he was like examining it, and they just thought it was really weird because he just like beelined for it. On top of this, his parents had actually loaned him $30,000, which he had yet to pay back. He hadn't paid it back, and they loaned him this money to help start his day trading business. You know, Jackie was at university studying engineering, and he was working from home day trading. And his parents had funded that. His dad's friend, Tad Cole, was also super supportive and gave him $5,000 to invest on his behalf. Ted and Corey were also paying for some of his monthly expenses, like his car payments, his insurance, his gas. And they were doing this with sort of a deal in place that they would pay for this and then he would pay them back. But then he stopped paying them back. And while his parents were so incredibly supportive of him and wanted to do everything they could to help him succeed in life, this definitely put a massive strain on the relationship, and they had been having some arguments about it in the months leading up to the murder. I mean, his parents didn't even want him to pursue this day trading thing. They were hoping that when he moved to College Station with Jackie and she started uni, that he would get bored at home and she would sort of inspire him to start at uni as well. And they also told him this $30,000 is like your college fund, you know, like once that $30,000 is gone, then that's it. You have to get a job. You know, we're not gonna fund this anymore. But the main argument that they were having was over the monthly expenses that they were paying for him, and he had been paying back, but then he stopped. And even though he had stopped paying them back, he was still showing up at their house. He and Jackie were in, you know, new clothes, new shoes. They had new flash things for their apartment. So he was obviously spending money on things that he wanted and not things that he needed. And for this reason, they decided to cut him off, and he was not happy about this, and they were getting into these fights. Eventually, they worked it all out. He started paying them back again, and, the whole family was on good terms again and they weren't having these strenuous arguments. But it was definitely a situation that detectives thought was suspicious, the timing of all of it. They searched Nick and Jackie's apartment and they found a box of ammunition there. And the ammunition was the same brand and caliber of bullets that had been found at the scene of the crime, and 6 rounds were missing from this box. On further investigation of Nick and Jackie's phone records, they also found that he had lied to them about the last time that he had been in Austin. So he told them in his interview that he hadn't gone to visit his parents for a month prior to the murder, but his phone records showed that he had actually been there on the 28th of February, so 2 days prior to the murder. They also found that there was a pretty clear gap on both Nick and Jackie's phones, which, they're 19 years old, they're always on their phones, they're texting, they're on social media. So it's very strange for these two 19-year-olds to just have these random gaps on both of their phones at the same time, where it seems like they've deleted a ton of stuff and potentially even factory reset their phones at the same time. But I think probably all of us here are aware that when you delete something from your phone, it's never truly gone. And they hadn't even deleted their messages or any of this information from their other Apple devices. And detectives found it. All of the stuff that was missing from their phones was right there on his computer. And it was pretty clear why he and Jackie wanted to delete all of it. There were some pretty incriminating texts from the days leading up to the murder, which indicated a murder for hire plot. And let me read you some of these texts because they're pretty much a smoking gun. On the 23rd of February, Jackie texts Nick and says, "Do they want $50K or not?" She also says, "We can't afford to pay half before." On the 28th of February, Nick texts Jackie and says, "Can you withdraw $1K?" And bank records show that she did take out that money. Their phone records also showed that they were in a lot more financial turmoil than Nick's parents knew about. And there was text conversations between Nick and a neighbor. She had lent him $2,600 and Nick had not paid her back. And she was threatening to tell his parents about all of this if he didn't pay her back the money as soon as possible. And then in another text conversation between Nick and Jackie, there were screenshots that showed that their bank accounts, they had less than $2 each in their bank accounts. Nick's phone records also showed that he accessed his parents' home security system at 5:39 a.m. So a full 5 minutes before he was notified that his dad had been murdered and this attack had taken place. So he was already awake, monitoring the situation before he supposedly found out about the murder. At that time, he should not have known anything was wrong. He had no reason to log onto their security system at all. And not only that, if he did log onto the security system for some unrelated reason, you'd think he would notice that something was wrong and try to contact his parents himself, but he didn't. His mum called him 5 minutes later and he acted completely shocked about the entire situation. To further all of this, detectives actually went and questioned his friend Spencer again because, like I said, they had felt like Spencer was hiding something from them. And in this second interview, Spencer reveals that Nick had actually offered to pay him to kill his parents. Spencer also said that Nick had told him, quote, "After my parents go, I will have $8 million. So if his parents are gone, he would be able, they each have a $1 million life insurance policy. So that's $2 million. He would get their business, their house, all of their possessions, the jewelry, and I guess that must have totaled to $8 million. Earlier on in the investigation, Corey actually hired Rick Flores, a defense attorney in Austin, to protect her son because she just felt like they were going down the wrong path. She thought that they were targeting him the same way that they had targeted her, and that there was no way that their son, who they loved so much and gave everything, gave every opportunity in life, gave $30,000, gave so much love and support, could do something like this. There's no way. But as weeks went past, Rick Flores could tell that things were not going in a good direction for Nick. And so he asked law enforcement, look, can you just let me know if an arrest is imminent? And almost 3 months after Ted's murder, on the 29th of May in 2018, they did just that. And so Rick asked Nick and Jackie to come into his office, where they were both arrested for criminal solicitation of capital murder. Corey didn't know about any of the information that detectives had, so she was devastated and she was certain that it was some kind of mistake. Because imagine your husband of 30 years, your best friend, and your dog are murdered almost in front of you, and your son and his girlfriend, who you love so much, you support, you trust with everything, and they come and live with you for 3 months to support you and comfort you through the hardest, most traumatic time of your life. And then in the end, after that 3 months, they are arrested for that murder. It's insane. 2 weeks later, Jackie was released on bail, and it was almost a relief for Corey because she was like, okay, the case is probably falling apart. They'll release Nick soon. It was all a big mistake, but that was not the case. Detectives knew that Nick and Jackie were not responsible for the murders themselves. You know, they were clearly at home. They're seen on their CCTV, security footage, whatever, at their house 2 hours away at the time of the murder. But they believed that they masterminded the whole thing, that they hired these two people to kill Nick's parents, and they had to find these shooters to prove that Nick and Jackie were behind it. So they went back through all of the security footage from Nick and Jackie's apartment, and that's when they find video footage from the 28th of February, so just 2 days before the murder. 2 random men enter the apartment, and eventually one of the guys leaves, and he's wearing a Renewal by Anderson t-shirt, which is the same company as the fingerprint from the window. Detectives contact the company, and they found out that this guy who entered Nick and Jackie's apartment was Cameron Vosmek. He actually had no connection to the employee whose fingerprint was on the window, so that just happened to be one big coincidence. But detectives went to Cameron's house to speak to him. He wasn't there, his wife was there, and she knew exactly why the police were there. And she told them that a man named Johnny Leon had asked her husband to commit murder for money. He basically asked Cameron to help with a moving job, but when they got to Nick's house, that's when Cameron found out that Nick actually wanted his parents dead. So he left, he wanted no part in it. He, went there thinking they were doing a moving job. So police then go and find 21-year-old Johnny Leon, and they question him and arrest him for capital murder. Initially, he denies everything, but when investigators confronted him with a photo of going into Nick's apartment, he admits that he went into the house and that Nick offered him $100,000 to kill his parents. And he said, quote, "When someone offers you $100K, you're gonna think about it." He admitted that he went to Austin with Nick on the 28th of February because Nick said that he was gonna murder his parents himself. They parked across the road from the Shaughnessy house. Nick went up to the house, and then he just couldn't do it, and he came back to the car and they went back to College Station. And this story all adds up with Nick's phone records that prove that he was at the Shaughnessy house on the 28th of February. Johnny tried to claim that that was the extent of his involvement, but when police looked through his phone records, they found that he had been at the Shaughnessy house at the time the murder took place, and his phone records also led them to the second killer, a man named Arian Smith. They had actually been arrested together as well a year earlier for drugs. So detectives then went and interviewed and arrested Arian Smith for capital murder, and at first he denied having any involvement. He said, go talk to my girlfriend, she'll tell you I was with her the whole night, I couldn't have been committing murder if I was with her. But then when they spoke to and questioned his girlfriend, she had a very different story. She said, he took my car and left me alone in a motel all night, and I tried to call him a bunch of times and he just never picked up. Detectives confronted him with this information and he then admitted to everything, and he broke down in the process. Like, he even requested the death penalty for himself because he felt so guilty. He said he couldn't sleep at night. He said, quote, "I killed somebody, I deserve to die, simple as that." He admitted that he was the one that fired the shot that killed Ted, and he said that he used Ted's own .40 caliber gun. So the gun that was missing from its box in the dresser in Nick's old room, that was the gun that he had used, and Nick was the one who had given it to him, and he led police straight to that gun. He told them that on the night that they went to the Shaughnessy house to complete the murder, that Nick disabled the home security system for them, and that Nick told them to enter the house through his old bedroom window. After these arrests were made and all of this information came out, Corey finally lost all faith in Nick and Jackie. It was undeniable that they were involved. I mean, I can't even imagine. She pretty much lost her entire family in the span of 3 months. And not only was her husband murdered, but he was murdered by their son, who, from the moment they adopted him, they loved him with all of their heart. He was their entire world, and this person that Ted loved so much had murdered him. It's insane that they adopted their own killer. It's insane that she had to unknowingly live with her husband's killer for 3 months after that. Corey said, quote, "It's very chilling. I bought all of the groceries. I paid all the bills. I bought her clothing. They thought they had gotten away with it." It was at this time that Jackie also started talking, and she completely turned on Nick. It was all Nick's idea. He did it because he knew that his parents had a $1 million life insurance policy each, and he had been struggling financially, but that wasn't his only reason. Jackie said that Nick had told her that his dad was depressed and miserable with his life, so it would almost be like doing him a favor. And then his mum, would be just cruel to make her live without Ted, so we've got to kill them both, which is just ridiculous. Corey said it wasn't true. Jackie even said in her interview that she didn't believe the whole depression story. She also denied having any specifics about the murder or the gunman. She claims that she didn't think that Nick would actually ever go through with it, so she never took him seriously.
This isn't you. You love your parents. Like, we visit them every weekend. We have fun. We're family. I've always wanted what I had with them. I didn't think Nick really had it in him to even think about it, and that's why I never took it as seriously as I should have.
I mean, it's obviously such a load of shit because her texts are there where she's saying, we can't afford $50K, but maybe they'll take 10. And then she got $1,000 out of her bank account to pay the killers. So she knew, she was completely involved. And I mean, she claims that she was just going along with it because she knew that he wasn't going to do it. And if he was going to do something crazy, she would be there to stop him, but she didn't stop him. And it's such bullshit anyway, because she then, after the murder, went on to live with Corey for 3 months, full well knowing that Nick was the murderer, knowing that she was involved, and she let Corey pay her rent, pay for her groceries, pay for her clothes, give her a diamond pendant, plan a wedding, party for them. She cried with Corey over Ted's murder and said that she hated Ted's murderers, all while knowing that she was responsible for the murder. It's actually insane. And if she truly had nothing to do with it, then why didn't she say anything? Why didn't she tell Corey? Why didn't she tell the police? She could have given the police at least an anonymous tip about Nick, but instead she lived with Corey for 3 months, crying with Corey, letting her buy her all of this stuff. She clearly had no remorse whatsoever, because if she had even the tiniest bit of remorse, she would have told someone and said something sooner. She lied to investigators for months. She lied to everyone for months. And then because she turned on Nick and gave them this information, she was allowed out on bail and she got to go and live her life. She was going to college parties, family events, going out with guys. It's so infuriating, but if you can believe it, it gets worse. So Nick Shaughnessy, Johnny Leon, and Ariane Smith had all been charged with capital murder, which can carry a maximum penalty of life without parole or even the death penalty. But in April of 2021, all three men pled guilty to a lesser charge of murder in exchange for a sentence of 35 years in prison with the possibility of parole. In June of 2023, Jackie ended up actually agreeing to a plea deal where she would plead guilty to a lesser charge of attempted conspiracy to commit murder by terror threat or other felony. And the court gave her something called deferred adjudication, which in Texas is basically where a person can plead guilty to an offense and be placed on probation, but ultimately not be convicted of the crime. So there's no finding of guilt if someone is given deferred adjudication. She only had to spend 120 days in county jail. She would be on probation for the following 10 years, and then every year on the anniversary of Ted's murder, she would go back to jail for 2 days. But she started serving her time in June of 2023, and she's already out. So pretty pathetic sentencing, if you ask me. And Nick ended up doing a few interviews last year, and he said that he never would have gone through with it if it wasn't for Jackie. Corey also thought the sentencing was completely pathetic, and she believes that Jackie pretty much got away with murder. She said, quote, "My husband is dead, my life is over, I'm supposed to be dead, and she gets probation." She also said in her victim impact statement, quote, "We open our home and our hearts to you, and you and Nicholas took everything from us. How long will it take for you to find another family to destroy? How long before Bonnie finds her next Clyde? You are a monster. You are evil, and everyone needs to know it." Corey also hasn't spoken to Nick since his arrest. Instead, she writes him letters, which she never intends to send.
Even though I will always love my child, I don't love the person that he is now. In fact, I really hate the person that he is now. And I can't tell you what I would give in this world to be able to talk again to his dad, but I can't. And so he's not going to get to talk to me because ghosts can't talk, and I'm supposed to be dead.
Nick has since said in interviews that he did last year, quote, "I wish that I could express how truly sorry I am and that the pain that I caused her was so selfish, and I'm trying each and every day to be the best version of myself to hopefully show the world one day that is not who I am." He admits that he had the perfect life, the perfect family, and he threw it all away. His parents gave him everything he could ever have wanted. They supported him in every way that they ever could have, and he repaid them by killing his dad and attempting to kill his mother as well. But that is everything for this case. I told you guys you would be shocked because my jaw was on the floor when I was researching this. The fact that they adopted their own killer is so insane to me. I cannot imagine the heartbreak that Corey felt finding out. Like, she's just had her husband murdered and one of her dogs as well, who was like, you know, their little fur baby. And 3 months later, she goes through the heartbreak all over again when she finds out that their son is the one who committed the murder, who orchestrated the murder. Like, it's actually unbelievable. It's so unbelievable. But yeah, that's everything from me today, guys. I hope you have a wonderful upcoming weekend, and hopefully I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.